Welcome back to the Nightmare Crypt. Lock your doors, dim the lights, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. What you're about to hear isn't a story, it's a confession. I don't know how much time I have left, and if you're listening to this, you need to understand something first. I didn't escape, I was released. I can still feel the weight on my chest when I close my eyes. Not metaphorical weight, real pressure, cold, precise, measured, like something was testing how much I could take before I broke. I'm writing this because I keep waking up with the same smell in my nose, old metal, damp concrete, and something sour that never fully aired out. It doesn't matter where I sleep, it follows me. That's how I know it wasn't just stress, or a breakdown, or some elaborate mistake. There are marks on my wrists that don't fade, perfectly parallel, no scar tissue. No explanation that sounds sane when I say it out loud. I was told not to talk about it, not directly. The paperwork I signed didn't threaten me outright. It didn't need to. It just kept repeating the same phrase in different ways. You agreed to the terms. You entered voluntarily. You were never in danger. That last part is a lie. I don't remember how long I was down there. Time didn't behave normally. There were no clocks, no windows, just the sound, the waiting, the slow understanding that something above me was moving, even when I couldn't see it. I'm not sharing this to scare you. I'm sharing it because people are still being invited. And because once you know how it works, once you understand the pit and the thing that swings above it, you start seeing the signs everywhere. If someone offers you an experience that promises clarity, control, or absolution, walk away. Because the moment you lie down, it's already too late. Before any of this happened, my life was aggressively normal. I lived alone in a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest. Concrete, rain, coffee shops that smelled like burnt beans and wet coats. I worked contract IT, server maintenance, security audits, boring stuff that paid well enough to keep me comfortable and isolated. My routine didn't change much. Wake up around 6:30, shower, black coffee, news on mute, work, microwave dinner, sleep. The first disruption came in the form of an email that didn't look like spam but didn't quite look legitimate either. No logo, no branding, just text. Participants needed, short duration, generous compensation, discretion required. I deleted it. Then it came again. Same wording, different sender. This time it included my full name and an old address I hadn't lived at in years. That should have been the end of it, but I didn't feel threatened. Just curious. The message didn't push, it didn't beg, it didn't even include a link. Just a phone number and a deadline. Curiosity is how they get you, not fear. I called. A man answered on the second ring. Calm, professional, American accent, hard to place. He thanked me for my interest, even though I hadn't expressed any. He said my background made me a strong candidate. He didn't explain what that meant. When I asked what the study involved, he paused, just long enough to feel intentional, and said, "You'll be monitored in a controlled environment. There's no risk. You can leave at any time." That phrase again. He emailed me paperwork within minutes, NDAs, consent forms, medical waivers that were technically optional but heavily encouraged. The pay was absurd for a weekend commitment. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I could walk away. I signed. The location wasn't disclosed until the morning of. I was instructed to drive alone, leave my phone in the car, and follow the coordinates exactly. The place was 2 hours inland, past cell service, past paved roads, into an industrial zone that looked abandoned decades ago. The building itself was low and wide, poured concrete with no windows on the ground level, no signage, just a single security camera mounted above a steel door. Inside, everything smelled clean in a way that felt aggressive. Bleach, ozone, something chemical that stung the back of my throat. A woman met me in the lobby, late 30s, hair pulled tight, clipboard. She smiled without warmth and asked me to confirm my name. Then she took my watch. "Standard procedure," she said. "Time perception interferes with results." That should have been my second warning. The first room they put me in looked like a minimalist hotel suite stripped of personality. Bed bolted to the floor. Sink, toilet behind a half wall. No mirror. The lights hummed faintly, not loud enough to be annoying, just enough to notice when they flickered. They told me to lie down and rest. I remember laughing, nervous, sure, but still joking. I asked when the actual test started. No one answered. The door closed with a sound that didn't echo. Thick, final. That's when I noticed the floor wasn't level. It dipped slightly toward the center of the room, like a shallow bowl, barely perceptible unless you stood still and paid attention. I told myself it was drainage. Industrial design. Hours passed. Or minutes. It's hard to say. Then I heard something move above me. Not footsteps, not machinery. A slow, deliberate slide, metal against metal, followed by a pause that felt intentional. I stood up and looked at the ceiling. There was a seam I hadn't noticed before, a long, narrow line running directly over the bed. I felt my heartbeat in my teeth. That was the moment I understood the room wasn't just a room. It was a container, and something inside it was waking up. If you're still listening at this point and your instincts are telling you to stop, listen to them. And if you want to hear the rest of what happened, how the floor began to change, and why the sound above me never stayed still, subscribe to Nightmare Crypt now. I just need you here for what comes next. The hum grew louder, the seam widened, and whatever was hanging above me began to descend. I didn't move at first, not because I was calm, but because my body didn't believe what my eyes were seeing. The seam in the ceiling widened by inches, slow and smooth, like it had been lubricated recently. Something dark slid into view. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady, controlled. A curved edge caught the light. I backed away from the bed without thinking, my heel slipping slightly as the slope of the floor finally made itself known. That's when panic hit, not all at once, but in pulses, like my brain was trying to throttle it so I wouldn't shut down completely. The thing above me wasn't sharp in the way knives are sharp. It was wide, heavy, industrial, a crescent of dull metal suspended from a track I still couldn't fully see. A pendulum, just waiting. A speaker crackled somewhere in the room, hidden, directionless. "Please remain calm," a man's voice said. Same accent as the phone call, same flat professionalism. "You're not in danger." That sentence finally broke something in me. I shouted. I demanded they let me out. I told them this wasn't what I agreed to. My voice sounded wrong in that room. Too loud, too alive. It didn't echo the way it should have. The pendulum twitched. Not down, sideways, just enough to prove it could move. The voice continued, unfazed. "Your vitals are within acceptable range. The device will descend incrementally. You may leave at any time." I ran to the door and slammed my fists against it. The steel didn't even vibrate. "Leave how?" I screamed. No answer. The pendulum began to swing. At first it was almost graceful, a slow arc, left to right, right to left. It stayed high, nowhere near me, but the air moved with it. Each pass displaced something I could feel against my skin, like a pressure change before a storm. I backed myself into a corner, knees shaking so badly I had to brace against the wall. I told myself it was a test, a scare tactic, some twisted psych evaluation. Then the pendulum dropped an inch. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just enough that I noticed the change in sound. When it cut through the air now, there was a faint whistle. I didn't scream after that. Screaming felt useless. Instead, my thoughts started racing. Too fast, overlapping, colliding. There had to be a trick, a sensor, a failsafe. This couldn't be real. I watched it complete another swing, then another. Each time it passed over the center of the room, it dipped lower. The descent wasn't constant, like it was calibrating, like it was learning. Sleep deprivation sets in faster than people think. Without windows, without time, without any change in light. Your body starts making mistakes. I don't know how long I stood there watching that thing move back and forth. but eventually my legs gave out, and I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. The slope pulled me inward, not enough to drag me, but enough that staying still required effort. That's when the pit revealed itself. At the exact center of the room, where the pendulum passed lowest, a circular outline became visible. Not a hole yet, just a seam in the floor, perfectly round, about 6 feet across. I crawled toward the wall on the opposite side, away from it. My breath came in short, sharp pulls that burned my chest. The pendulum passed overhead, closer now, close enough that I could see marks on the metal, scratches, discoloration, patches where it had been cleaned repeatedly but never fully polished. This wasn't new, it wasn't experimental, it had been used. I heard something else then, not from above, from below, a low mechanical whine, almost subsonic, vibrating through the floor. The seam of the circle darkened, widening by fractions of an inch. The pit was opening. I started laughing. I didn't mean to, it just happened. A thin, hysterical sound that shocked me as much as anything else. I clamped my hand over my mouth, terrified they'd hear it, even though I knew they already could. The speaker crackled again. "Subject shows signs of cognitive stress," the voice said. Not to me, but to someone else. Proceeding as planned, the pendulum dropped again. This time there was no mistaking the intent. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not toward the door, not toward the pit, but in a useless circle around the perimeter of the room. The slope fought me the whole way, tugging at my shoes, pulling me inward like gravity itself had been altered. Each swing brought the metal closer to my head. I could feel the air displacement now, the pressure brushing my hair and my shoulders. I ducked instinctively as it passed. That was when I realized something that drained what little hope I had left. The pendulum wasn't centered on the room. It was centered on me. Wherever I moved, its lowest point adjusted slightly on the next pass. Just enough to stay aligned. I wasn't in a trap. I was the target. At some point, I can't tell you when, the pit finished opening. The seam in the floor split cleanly, revealing darkness below. Not a shaft with visible walls, just a void that swallowed the light around it. The slope steepened. Standing became difficult. I slid when I tried to stop. My hands scraped against the floor, skin burning as I tried to grip polished concrete that offered nothing back. The pendulum swung lower still. I flattened myself against the wall, pressing my cheek into the cold surface, breathing shallow, trying to make myself smaller. The metal passed inches above my back. I felt the vibration through my spine. I whispered promises to myself, bargains, lies. I told myself if I survived, I'd disappear, change my name, never trust another human being again. The pendulum didn't care. It dropped again, and this time when it passed, something brushed my shoulder. Not enough to break skin, just enough to let me know it could. That was my moment of pure panic. I lost control completely. I screamed until my throat felt raw. I kicked at the wall. I begged. I threatened. I cried so hard I couldn't see straight. The pendulum continued its rhythm, indifferent. The pit waited. Eventually exhaustion took over. My body couldn't maintain that level of terror indefinitely. My movements slowed. My thoughts dulled. I found myself lying on my side, muscles twitching, eyes half closed despite the danger inches above me. That's when the lights changed. They dimmed, not off, just lower. The shadows deepened, stretching in ways that didn't quite line up with the pendulum's motion. The speaker crackled one last time. Phase 2, the voice said, and the floor began to move. The movement started beneath my ribs. Not sudden. Nothing in that place was ever sudden. It was a slow, mechanical shift, like a massive structure settling into a new configuration. The floor panels along the outer edge of the room tilted inward another few degrees. Not enough to knock me loose, but enough that staying put required constant tension. The pit widened. I rolled onto my stomach and dug my fingers into the narrow seam where the wall met the floor. My nails bent. One of them split. My whole body had narrowed its focus to one task. Don't slide. The pendulum passed again, lower than ever. The whistle it made through the air changed pitch. Deeper now, heavier. It was close enough that I could smell it. Hot metal, oil, something faintly coppery that turned my stomach. I pressed my forehead against the wall and kept my eyes shut. That's when the sound started. At first, I thought it was my breathing echoing back to me, but the timing was wrong. The inhales were staggered, delayed, as if someone else were breathing just out of sync with me. I opened my eyes. Nothing had changed visually. Same blank concrete, same dim lights, same widening pit. The sound came again. A breath. Not from the speaker, not mechanical, human. I twisted my head, heart slamming, and scanned the room. No vents big enough for a person. Just me, the pendulum, and the pit. Hello, I croaked. The breath stopped. Then from somewhere behind the wall I was clinging to, I heard a voice. My voice, I can't hold on, it said softly. My stomach dropped so fast I nearly lost my grip. The voice wasn't distorted. It wasn't mocking. It sounded exhausted, hoarse, exactly how I felt. I don't think I'm going to make it, it continued. I shook my head hard enough to make my vision blur. Stop, I whispered. Please. The pendulum passed again, closer. The air pressure pushed my shirt against my skin. The voice sighed. It hurts less if you let go. That was the moment of paralyzing dread. The instant my brain accepted that whatever was happening wasn't just physical. They weren't testing endurance or fear responses or pain tolerance. They were testing surrender. The floor tilted another degree. My fingers slipped. I slid a few inches toward the center before catching myself again, palms screaming as skin tore away. I screamed too this time. Short, raw, animal. The voice behind the wall chuckled quietly. See, it said, you're already tired. The pendulum dipped again. I flattened myself as much as I could, body trembling, teeth chattering uncontrollably. I could feel vibrations now, not just from the pendulum, but from below. Something deep beneath the pit was active, waiting. That's when I realized something else. The pendulum wasn't meant to kill me, not quickly. It was meant to herd me. Every adjustment of the floor, every descent of the blade, every whisper from the walls, it all pointed toward the same destination, the pit. I was never supposed to die under the pendulum. I was supposed to fall. The speaker crackled, almost lazily. Subject approaching compliance, the voice said. Maintain parameters. No, I gasped. I don't consent. I'm withdrawing. I'm done. There was a pause. Not static, just silence. Then, you agreed to the terms. The floor shifted again. This time, my grip failed. I slid halfway to the edge of the pit before I managed to twist my body and hook one elbow against the floor. My legs dangled over the darkness, kicking uselessly. Cold air rose from below, carrying a smell I hadn't noticed before. Not decay, sterilization, like a hospital after something has gone very wrong. I heard the voice again, closer now, not behind the wall, from below me. I didn't think I'd be scared anymore, it said, but I am. I looked down. I wish I hadn't. Something reflective caught the light deep in the pit. Not metal, not water. An eye, human, looking up at me. My vision tunneled. My grip failed completely. I felt myself tip forward, and then the pendulum struck the floor behind me. Not me. The impact shook the entire room. A deafening clang that rattled my teeth and knocked the breath from my lungs. The blade embedded itself inches from where my head had been, quivering violently. The sudden stop disrupted the slope. Just enough. I slammed into the floor hard, chest first, knocking the wind out of myself but stopping short of the pit. I lay there coughing, sobbing, too stunned to move. The pendulum retracted. Slowly, as it rose, the floor began to level out. The pit sealed itself with the same surgical precision it had opened. The lights brightened. The room returned to how it had looked when I first entered. Clean, neutral, empty. The speaker came back on. Session complete, the voice said. Please remain where you are. The door opened. They helped me up, gave me water. Told me I'd performed within acceptable deviation. No one met my eyes. When I asked about the pit, about the voice, they exchanged a look I didn't understand at the time. Residual stress response, one of them said. Very common. They returned my watch. It was running again. I left the building under my own power, signed one last form, drove home in silence. I didn't feel relieved. I felt unfinished. I still hear the pendulum sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. Not loud, just the suggestion of movement. A pressure change in the room. A rhythm that doesn't belong to anything around me. And sometimes, when I'm especially tired, I hear my own voice whispering from somewhere I can't see, telling me to let go. I don't think the pit was the end of the test. I think it was the beginning. I didn't go to the hospital. That's the first lie I told myself after it was over. That I was fine. That whatever they'd done to me had ended when I walked out of that building. I went home, showered until my skin burned, and threw my clothes away in a dumpster behind my apartment like they were contaminated. I kept expecting the smell to wash off. It didn't. That sterile, metallic scent followed me everywhere. It clung to my hands, my hair, my sheets. I scrubbed until my knuckles cracked, but every time I stopped moving, I could smell it again. Faint, patient, waiting. Sleep became impossible. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see the pendulum anymore. I felt it. That sense of measured inevitability. The certainty that something above me was still in motion, even if I couldn't see it. The dreams were worse. In them, the pit never closed. I'd be lying on that sloped floor again, fingers bleeding, muscles screaming, and this time there was no interruption. No impact to stop my fall. Just the slow, humiliating slide forward while the voice, my voice, kept whispering encouragement. You don't have to fight anymore. This part doesn't last long. I started waking up on the floor beside my bed, nails torn, heart racing like I'd been running. That's when the marks on my wrists began to change. They didn't fade like normal pressure marks. They darkened, deepened, almost like bruises that refused to heal. When I pressed on them, I felt a dull ache, not in my skin, but deeper, like something remembered pressure instead of pain. I tried to tell someone. A therapist listened politely until I mentioned the pit, the pendulum, the voices. Then her tone shifted. She started asking about stress, hallucinations, dissociation. She suggested medication. I never went back. A week later, I got an email. No sender name, no subject line. Just one sentence. Thank you for your participation. Further observation may be required. I threw my laptop across the room. That night I heard it again. Not the pendulum, the floor. A subtle vibration beneath my apartment. So faint I almost convinced myself it was traffic or plumbing, until it repeated at regular intervals. Every 30 seconds, like a breath. I lay perfectly still, counting, sweat soaking the sheets. The vibration grew stronger, closer, like something aligning itself beneath me. Then I heard a whisper, not from the walls, from inside my chest. You did well, it said. Most people fall sooner. That was the moment I understood the truth I'd been avoiding since the beginning. I wasn't released because I passed. I was released because I was compatible. Whatever that place was, whatever system they built, it didn't end at the walls of that room. It followed, it watched, it waited for the conditions to be right again. The pit wasn't a location, it was a process. I'm writing this now because the vibrations have started happening during the day. Because sometimes I feel the floor tilt just slightly when I stand still for too long. Because when I lie down at night, I swear I can feel something above me, measuring the distance. If someone offers you a test, if they promise control, if they tell you you can leave at any time, don't believe them. Some things don't need to kill you to own you. And once you've been measured, once you've been weighed over the pit, it never really stops swinging. The crypt is closing, for now. If this confession unsettled you, subscribe to Nightmare Crypt, leave a like to keep the shadows at bay, and share this with someone who still thinks fear is just a feeling. Stay safe out there, because once you know about the pit, you start noticing how many places slope inward.